Hello, welcome to our channel, and I hope you enjoy our story.
She only wanted to save her heart from a humiliating spectacle, but ended up doing the exact opposite. She crossed a party full of businessmen, perfect heiresses, and curious stares, placed her hand on the chest of the most powerful boss in the company, and kissed him in front of everyone. The problem? He didn't push her away. He held her by the waist as if he had been waiting for that moment for months. And from that kiss on, nothing at the office was ever professional again. The chandelier scattered light across the ballroom like spilled diamonds, and Claire Bennett set her champagne flute down on a tray she would never reach again. She did not know it yet. From the far corner near the windows, she watched him. Adrian Hartley stood half a head above the cluster of executives who circled him, his shoulders rigid inside the dark suit, his jaw working under the gold light. His mother had her hand on his sleeve. The grip looked gentle. It was not. Beside Vivian Hartley stood a woman in champagne silk, slender and polished, the kind of beauty that arrived in a town car and never carried her own coat. She laughed at something. Adrian did not. Claire knew that face he was wearing. She had seen it in his glass office during the third revision of the East Wharf project, when an investor pushed too hard. She had seen it across the boardroom table the day he learned a contractor had cut corners on a heritage facade. It was the face of a man who held himself together by sheer engineering. For a moment she could not look away. 6 months. That was how long she had worked under him as a junior architect on the firm's restoration division. 6 months of crossing each other in the marble lobby, of standing too close in elevators that always seemed to take too long, of meetings where he asked her opinion in front of senior partners, and listened. Actually listened, as if her words mattered. 6 months of never saying any of it out loud. A waiter passed with a tray of small bites. Claire shook her head without looking. Across the room, Vivian's voice rose just enough for Claire to catch the edges of it. "Margaret has been telling me all about her trip to Florence. Adrian, sweetheart, you simply must hear about the villa." Margaret smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had been told she would be married by Christmas. Adrian's eyes lifted. Not to Margaret. Not to his mother. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. They found Claire. For an instant, the noise of the ballroom thinned to almost nothing. He looked at her across 200 people, and she felt the look land on her chest like a steady hand placed there in silence. There was something tired in it. Something asking, though she could not have said for what. Then Vivian tugged at his sleeve and the moment broke. Claire turned her face toward the window. The Boston skyline glittered beyond the glass, the harbor a black sheet beneath it. She thought very clearly that she should leave. Go home, change out of these heels, eat cereal on the couch, and forget she had ever been hired by Hartley Restoration. She also thought that her grandmother had once told her, on the porch of an old house in Maine, that the worst regrets in life are always the small kindnesses you never let yourself give. Claire smoothed her hand down the front of her dress. It was a soft cream, plain at the shoulders, cut just below the knee, the cheapest piece she owned and the only one without a coffee stain. She had ironed it twice that afternoon, hands shaking for reasons she had not been brave enough to name. Now she named them. She loved him. She had loved him since the morning he had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves to help the cleaning crew move a fallen ladder out of the lobby, when he could have called maintenance and walked past. She had loved him since the afternoon he had remembered 3 weeks later that she did not drink coffee and had brought her green tea without saying a word. She had loved him in 100 small, ordinary ways that she had hidden even from herself. And there he was, being handed off to a stranger like a trophy. Vivian was now leaning toward her son, whispering something with the particular intensity of a mother who is finished asking. Margaret rested her hand on Adrian's arm, lightly. He did not move. He did not smile. He looked like a man drowning in a very clean shirt. The string quartet finished a number. The room broke into polite applause. Claire heard the click of her own heels before she felt her feet move. One step, then another. The marble was hard under her. The music began again. Somewhere behind her, a woman laughed too loudly. None of it touched her. She walked through the crowd as if it were water, as if every face turned toward her was a stone she had to pass without feeling. She did not have a speech. She did not have a plan. She had only the thin, terrified certainty that if she did not do this now, she would never do it at all. Adrian saw her coming. His eyes widened, just a fraction. His mother followed his gaze. Claire kept walking. The space between them shrank to a single breath. Adrian had spent his entire adult life reading rooms. It was a skill, not a gift, learned in 100 boardrooms where a single wrong word could collapse a deal. He could tell by the angle of a shoulder whether a man was about to walk out. He could tell by the pause before a yes whether a woman meant no. He had no idea what was happening to him now. Claire Bennett was crossing his mother's ballroom in a cream dress and low heels, and her eyes had not left his since the third step. There was no hesitation in her face. There was something else, something that looked almost like grief. His mother's hand tightened on his sleeve. "Adrian, who is—" He did not answer. Claire reached him. Up close she was smaller than he remembered, or perhaps he had simply never let himself stand this close to her outside of a hallway. He caught the faint scent of her shampoo, something like green tea and clean linen, and he registered in some far corner of his mind that she was trembling. She lifted her hand. It landed flat against his chest, over the heart, and he felt the press of her palm through 3 layers of fabric as if there had been none. "Claire," he said. It came out lower than he meant. She rose onto the balls of her feet. She kissed him. The world did not slow down, the way the books always claim. It simply stopped. The string quartet, the clink of glass, his mother's outraged inhalation, none of it reached him. There was only the soft press of her mouth, the small brave shake of her hand still on his chest, and the singular blinding fact that Claire Bennett was kissing him in front of 300 people. He had 2 clear seconds to make a choice. He chose her. His arm moved before thought could catch up. He gathered her against him, his hand finding the small of her back, holding her as if she were the only person in the crowded room. He felt a deep sense of relief, a quiet certainty that had been building since she had walked into his office on her first morning carrying a portfolio too heavy for her arms. It was a moment of complete clarity, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had hidden for months. Somewhere far away, Vivian Hartley made a sound. Margaret took a step back. The ballroom rippled. Murmurs rose and broke. A woman near the windows gasped audibly. A waiter froze with a tray of canapes held at an unnatural angle. Adrian was the one who pulled back, only because his lungs reminded him they existed. Claire's eyes were closed. When they opened, they were wet and very wide, and looking at him as if she had just remembered she was going to be fired in the morning. He did not give her time to speak. His hand slid into hers, fingers closing firm around her smaller ones, and he turned. The crowd parted for him the way crowds had always parted for him, but tonight he barely noticed. He walked. She walked with him. He felt her stumble once, and steadied her without looking down. His mother called his name. Twice. He did not turn his head. They crossed the threshold of the ballroom, and the noise muted behind them. Down a corridor lined with portraits of old benefactors, past a closed coatroom, past a janitor who did not look up. He found the door he wanted, the small conference room used during charity galas, and he pulled her inside. The lock clicked. For a second, neither of them moved. Claire was the first to find her voice. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I—" He did not answer with words. He crossed the room. He did not rush. He moved the way he moved when he had decided something, and did not intend to be talked out of it, and she went very still as he reached her. His hand came up to her cheek, and he kissed her. It was a quiet promise that everything would be fine. In the silence of the room, away from the prying eyes, he held her close, letting her know without a single word that she was safe, and that everything was about to change. She let her forehead drop against his shoulder when it ended, and he felt her grip the lapel of his jacket as if it were the only solid thing in the city. He set his cheek against her hair. "Claire," she made a small, uncertain sound. "Look at me." She lifted her face. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw, gentle, and he held her gaze a long moment before he said it. "I have wanted to do that since the first day you walked into my office." The kettle had just started its low whistle when the buzzer rang from the lobby downstairs. Adrian set down the cup he had been about to fill. He did not need to ask who it was. He had been waiting for her since the moment Claire had fallen asleep in the cab home, and he had walked her up to her door, tucked her shawl around her shoulders, and turned away before he could ask to come inside. He had known his mother would come. What he had not counted on was the way the morning sun fell across his kitchen island and made him think, again, of the faint green tea scent of Claire's hair. The intercom buzzed twice. Sharper. "Come up," he said. Vivian Hartley swept into his apartment the way she swept into every room, with the certainty that everyone else would arrange themselves around her. She did not take off her coat. She did not sit. "Margaret Ashworth is staying with her father for the next 2 weeks," she said. "Walter's health has taken a turn for the worse. He's asked me to help him settle his affairs. All of them." Adrian leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry to hear about Walter." "Don't insult him with sorries. He wants this settled before things get any harder. He wants his daughter looked after by someone he trusts, and someone capable of running the firm he built with his own 2 hands. He has asked for you, and I have given my answer. You have given a scandal." He did not argue. He had no interest in arguing about a woman who had not been the one in the room. His mother set her gloves down on the counter with great precision. "Who is she?" "Claire Bennett, a junior architect on the restoration team." A beat. "A junior, yes. Adrian. That is her position, not who she is." "Then please, enlighten me. Tell me who exactly this woman is." He looked at his mother a long moment. "She is the person I am interested in," he said, "and I would appreciate it if you spoke about her with the same respect you expect to receive." Vivian's chin lifted half an inch. "You don't know her." "I know enough." "You know enough after 1 kiss in a ballroom?" "I know enough after 6 months." It came out sharper than he meant. He saw it land. His mother's hand drifted to the counter and steadied itself, very lightly, against the cold marble. She had built a life out of arrangements. Marriages, mergers, names that meant something on letterhead. She had not raised a son to fall in front of 300 people for a girl with no family money and a portfolio of restored brick warehouses. "This is not over," she said quietly. "I know." She gathered her gloves. At the doorway she paused without turning. "I will not lose you to a whim, Adrian. It isn't a whim." The door closed with a soft, perfectly mannered click. He stood in the kitchen a long time afterward, watching the steam rise from the kettle he had forgotten about. Claire's morning began with a headache and a half-eaten piece of toast. She had not slept. She had lain on her side, staring at the radiator pipes against her bedroom wall, replaying the kiss until her own face burned in the dark. By 8 she had given up, put on plain grey trousers and a soft sweater, and gone in early on a Sunday because she could not bear to be alone with what she had done. The office was almost empty. She opened a drawing she had been adjusting for the East Wharf Hotel, a modest brick boutique they were restoring on the harbour, and tried badly to focus. She was halfway through a misaligned cornice when the door of her section opened. She looked up. Adrian was holding a small white pastry box. He set it on her desk. "Cheesecake," he said. "From the place on Hanover Street. The one with the rude woman at the counter." Claire stared at the box, then at him, then at the box again. "How did you know?" "You told Marta in accounting, in the elevator 3 weeks ago. She said the woman is rude. You said the cheesecake is worth it." A small, helpless laugh escaped her. "You listen to everything I say." "I listen to everything you say." He did not lean on the desk. He did not sit. He simply stood there, his hands loose at his sides, the morning light catching the side of his face. And she felt, strangely and suddenly, as if the room had grown a little quieter around them. "Claire," she looked up, "I have to ask something. And I need you to know I am not asking because I am ashamed." Her stomach pulled. "Ask." "Could we keep this quiet for a little while, just inside the building, until I've settled things at home?" She held his eyes. "Okay." He nodded once. Then he did something small and easy that she would replay many times that week. He reached down, took her hand in his for the briefest moment, pressed his thumb across her knuckles, and let go. He was at the door before he spoke again. Eat the cheesecake." The door closed. She sat a long while, the place his thumb had pressed still alive on her knuckles. The OK had been easy. The why was harder. 2 weeks after the gala, Claire Bennett still flinched every time Adrian walked into a room. It was not fear. It was the small, ridiculous lift of her heart that arrived whenever she heard his voice in the corridor, and had to remember, before he reached her desk, to look as if she had not heard it. The senior partners had stopped whispering. The interns had stopped staring. Whatever rumor had bloomed in the days after the ballroom kiss had run out of fuel inside a week, and Boston, as always, had moved on to the next scandal. Inside the office, no one knew. That was the agreement. So during the day they passed each other like colleagues. He nodded across a meeting table. She kept her eyes on her drawings. He stood 3 feet behind her in the print room and discussed a contractor's bid with a calmness she did not believe for a moment. And then there were the small things. He came into her section at exactly 11:14 every Tuesday and Thursday to drop off the East Wharf revisions. She had timed it twice, and now did not need to. A pastry box sometimes, a small paper cup of green tea other times. Once a single rose cut short, in a glass jar he had clearly found in the office kitchen, set down without a word. He never closed the door. He never lingered. He never had to. The first night he came to her apartment was a Thursday in late October. It rained from 4 in the afternoon, the kind of slow, grey Boston rain that turned every cab into a small miracle. Claire was on her sofa in wool socks and an old college sweatshirt, eating cereal out of a mug because her bowls were in the sink, when the buzzer rang. She knew before she answered. He came in shaking water from his coat, hair damp at the temples, smelling faintly of city rain and the cedar of his cologne. He looked around her apartment, the unmatched chairs, the bookshelf made of 2 cinder blocks and a board, the radiator she had decorated with a doily because she had run out of better ideas, and he smiled. It was a small smile, crooked at one corner. "This is a good place," he said. She laughed. "Has $2,600 and a closet full of mice. Then it's a good place with character." He hung his coat on the back of her chair, the way a man hangs a coat in a place he intends to come back to, and he sat down on her sofa as if he had sat there 100 times. She made tea. Her hands shook just barely when she set the mugs on the coffee table. He noticed everything. "Come here," he said, and patted the cushion beside him. She came. He did not kiss her. He did not pull her close. He put his arm along the back of the sofa, his hand resting near her shoulder without touching it, and asked her, properly, the way men used to ask things, about her day. She told him. She told him about the misaligned cornice, about the contractor who refused to return her calls until she had her supervisor call instead, about the way she had been corrected, in a meeting, by a man she had once tutored in second-year drafting. His jaw set just a little at that one. What was his name? "It doesn't matter. Claire." "It doesn't matter, Adrian. Don't." He looked at her. Then he let it go. But she saw, very clearly, where his protectiveness lived in him. Close to the surface, quiet and a little dangerous in the way of a man who has the resources to ruin a small inconvenience and the discipline not to. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He did not move for a long moment. Then he turned his face slowly and pressed his lips against the top of her hair. It was such a small kiss. She felt it down to her socks. They watched a black and white film she had on her shelf and did not really watch. She fell asleep halfway through. When she woke, he had pulled a blanket over her and was reading on his phone, his free hand resting, steady and unhurried, against her ankle. He left near midnight. At the door he turned, his hand on the frame, his eyes on her like she was a question he was still working out. "What?" she said softly. "I wish I could stay." "You can." He shook his head. "Once." "Not yet." He kissed her forehead, gentle, deliberate, and was gone. She closed the door and stood with her back against it. She thought very clearly, "He is being careful with me." And then, softer, "Why does that scare me more than if he weren't?" Claire's grandmother had a phone with a coiled cord and no idea why anyone would want a smartphone. "You sound funny," Eleanor Bennett said from the porch in Camden, Maine, where she had been answering that same phone for 40 years. "What did you do?" I didn't do anything, Graham. You always say that when you've done something. Claire laughed, and then the laugh caught in her throat, because the truth was that she had done something 3 weeks ago, and she had not, even now, found a way to say it out loud. There's a man. Ah, it's complicated. They always are. A pause. Eleanor was not a woman who filled silences. Claire could hear faintly the wind chimes on her grandmother's porch, 3 small brass ones her grandfather had hung the summer he built the railing. Is he kind? Eleanor asked. Yes. Is he good to you? Yes. Then what's the trouble? Claire sat down on the edge of her bed and pressed the phone harder against her ear. His mother doesn't approve of me, and he asked me to keep us quiet. Just for a while. Another pause. Longer. Honey, listen to me. There's a difference between a man who hides you and a man who's protecting you from something he hasn't fixed yet. You'll know which it is by how he treats you in private, not by what he announces in public. Claire closed her eyes. I love you, Graham. I know you do. Now eat something. You sound thin. That afternoon, Adrian sent a car for her. He had not done that before. The text was short. An address, a time, the words, if you'd like, and Claire stared at her phone almost a full minute before she answered yes. She had imagined his apartment many times. The reality was both more and less than she had expected. It sat near the top of a glass building over the harbour, an entire floor of warm wood and dark stone, with a wall of windows that turned the city into a still painting. Books filled an entire shelf in the living room, architecture, history, biographies. A small kitchen smelled of garlic and something slow cooking, but it had no photographs, not one. Not of his mother, not of his brother, not of any friend. It was the apartment of a man who had stopped letting people stand still in his life, long enough to take a picture. Adrian opened the door in a soft grey sweater and dark trousers, his hair slightly damp at the temples, and when he saw her, the line of his shoulders eased. Hi, he said. Hi. She stepped inside. He did not kiss her. He took her coat instead, the way someone takes a coat in a place that has been waiting for it. He had made pasta, orecchiette with sausage and broccoli rabe, his grandmother's recipe, he told her, the one Italian thing he had inherited from a father who had otherwise left him only a name and a stubborn streak. They ate at his kitchen counter because the dining table, he said, was too far away to be near her. She laughed at that. He smiled into his glass. They talked about easy things, the East Wharf project. Her sister, who had just had a baby in Vermont and refused to send pictures because she said motherhood looked terrible on camera. His brother Julian, 3 years younger, who ran a small documentary firm in Brooklyn, and once a month emailed Adrian an article about how to be less of a corporate cliché. What's he like? Claire asked. Julian? Adrian thought. Honest, to a fault. He's the only person in my family who would tell me I had food on my chin. And the only one who would tell you about me? He glanced at her. Yes, he'd like you. You haven't told him. I will. When there's something settled to tell. Something flickered, small behind her ribs. She put it away. After dinner he made tea, and they sat on his sofa and watched the lights along the harbour. She tucked her feet under her. He held her hand on his thigh as if it was something that could break. She thought of her grandmother's voice. You'll know which it is by how he treats you in private. She turned to him. Adrian. Are you ashamed of me? He went still. He set down the mug. He turned to face her fully, his knee almost touching hers, his hand still holding hers like a small living thing. No. Then why? Because my mother is capable of more than you know, and because the only thing she could do to hurt me right now is hurt you. And I am not letting her near you. Not until I have made sure she can't reach you, do you understand? She looked at him. She did and she didn't. Okay. He lifted her hand and pressed it, palm down against his chest, over the heart, the way she had done in the ballroom. Stay with that, he said, when you doubt me. She felt the steady, even beat under her palm. She stayed with it. The East Wharf Hotel had not been a hotel in 80 years. It had been a customs office, then a cordage warehouse, then a sad little museum no one visited, and for the past 2 decades It had been a brick shell with broken windows and pigeons in the rafters. The day Adrian Hartley's firm signed the papers, Claire had stood on the second floor with a roll of drawings under one arm and a hard hat she could not stop adjusting, and she had thought, "We can save this." That had been 10 months ago. Now, on a cold Wednesday in November, the windows had glass in them again. The floors had been swept of decades of plaster dust. A wooden scaffold ran up the side of the original spiral staircase, where craftsmen, actual craftsmen, the kind who carried their tools in leather rolls, were recutting the missing balusters by hand. Claire loved it here. She loved the smell. Old wood and fresh paint, mortar, and the faint salt of the harbour a block away. She loved the way the morning light fell through the tall windows onto the unfinished floor. She loved the way nothing in this building was new, and everything was being made new again, slowly, by people who cared. She did not love that Adrian had been on site since 7. He stood in the lobby in jeans and a wool jacket she had not seen before, dark hair pushed back, hard hat under one arm, listening to the head contractor explain a problem with a load-bearing wall on the 3rd floor. He looked, Claire thought, more like himself here than anywhere else. He glanced up and caught her watching. She had to look away. "Ms. Bennett." It was Marta from accounting, passing with a clipboard. "We're holding the 11 o'clock in the back room." "I'll be there." She climbed the scaffold to the 2nd floor. She was checking the dimensions of a window casing against her drawing when the rung underfoot gave a small, unpleasant lurch. She did not fall. She caught herself on the railing. But Adrian was up the scaffold before she had time to be embarrassed. "You all right?" "Fine, it's the scaffold, not me." His eyes went past her to the loose rung, then to the foreman on the floor below. "Mike." "Yes, sir?" "This scaffold is coming down today. Replace it." "On it. And nobody works on it between now and then." "Yes, sir." He turned back to Claire. His hand was still on her elbow. He had not, she noticed, said anything aloud that was not professional, but he had also not let go. "Come with me," he said quietly. "I want to show you something." He led her to a small room at the back of the building, the one that would become the bridal suite when they were finished. 2 long windows faced the harbour. An old marble fireplace had survived 3 changes of ownership and was, in Claire's opinion, the single most beautiful thing in the entire structure. He closed the door behind them. For a moment, they did not speak. The room was empty of workmen. The harbour light came in soft and grey through the dusty glass. Somewhere far below, a saw started up and stopped. He turned to her. "You scared me." "I didn't fall." "You scared me, Claire." She looked at him. There was something in his face she had not seen before, something thin and rough at the edge, like a man who had had less sleep than he was admitting. She set her hand on his arm. "I'm okay." He covered her hand with his. "I know." It was not a kiss. It was not even an embrace. It was the 2 of them in an empty room, his hand over hers, the smell of old plaster around them, the harbour turning slow and pewter outside the windows. He looked at her like he was building something in his head and could not just yet find the right joint for it. "What are you thinking?" she said. "That I want to bring you here when this is done. When the lobby is lit, when there's music." "Why?" He did not answer. He only pressed her hand more firmly against his arm and looked instead at the fireplace. She let it be. Across town, in a quiet office above a small art gallery on Newbury Street, Vivian Hartley was meeting with a man whose business card read, "Only Consultant." He had brought a slim portfolio of photographs. "I want options," she said, setting her purse down. "Subtle ones." "Of course, Mrs. Hartley. And I want them on my desk in 3 weeks." He nodded. She did not smile. The door clicked shut behind her. Outside, the November sky over Newbury Street had gone the colour of pewter. A boy ran past with his school bag slapping against his back. Vivienne pulled her scarf tighter at her throat and walked toward her waiting car, the heels of her boots even on the brick sidewalk. She did not, for one moment, doubt herself. She had built her life on knowing what was best for everyone. She fully intended to keep doing so. Julian Hartley arrived in Boston on a Friday afternoon with a duffel bag, a documentary edit that was 3 weeks late, and the particular expression he saved for when he already knew something was wrong with his older brother. He let himself into Adrian's apartment with the key he had kept since he was 19. He dropped the bag in the hallway. He found Adrian on the balcony in a coat too light for the weather, looking at the harbor like the harbor had said something insulting. "All right," Julian said. "Who is she?" Adrian glanced over. "You came all the way from Brooklyn for this?" "I came all the way from Brooklyn because Mom called me at 2 in the morning saying you'd lost your mind. So obviously yes. Who is she?" Adrian let himself smile, the small private smile that almost never made it past his teeth. "She is the best person I know. And you've been keeping her quiet?" "For now." Julian leaned against the railing. "Adrian, don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm asking, have you told her why you're keeping her quiet?" "Yes." "Has she really heard you?" Adrian was quiet a long moment. The wind came off the harbor with the smell of cold metal and oily water. Somewhere below, a ferry sounded once. "I don't know," he said. "Right. What does that mean?" "Right. It means you've been making 1,000 small decisions for her without showing her the whole map. And I love you, Adrian, but you're a man who hates being managed and somehow you keep managing the people you love. So I'm telling you, show her the map, or she's going to start drawing her own." Adrian looked at his brother for a long time. Julian, who had inherited their father's loud laugh and their mother's exact eyes, and absolutely none of her instinct for arrangement. Julian, who told the truth even when it was inconvenient, especially then. "You're getting better at this," Adrian said. "I've been in therapy since I was 23, I should hope so." A pause. "I'd like you to meet her. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. Pick a place she likes." "Done." Julian pushed off the railing. Then, because Julian was Julian, he turned at the doorway and added, "And feed her something. You look like a man who's forgetting to eat in solidarity." He went inside. Adrian stood a moment longer alone on the balcony, watching the lights begin to come on along the wharf. He thought about the map. He had not shown her even half of it. That Saturday, the three of them met at a small Lebanese place in the South End that Claire loved for the bread and the way the owner's mother shouted at her son from the kitchen in 3 languages at once. Claire wore jeans and a soft green blouse and laughed nervously at almost everything for the first 10 minutes. Julian put her at ease the way Julian put everyone at ease. "So," he said, dipping bread in oil, "tell me how my brother annoyed you the first time you met him." "He didn't." "Liar." Claire laughed. It came out real this time. "Fine. He looked at my portfolio for 45 minutes without saying a single thing. I thought I was going to be sick." "Yeah, that sounds about right." Then he said, and I quote, "The cornice on page 8 is wrong, but everything else is the best thing I've seen this year." Julian turned to Adrian. "Smooth. It's a fair review. It's the worst flirting I've ever heard in my life." Claire was laughing again, really laughing, the kind that came up from her belly and made the table behind them turn around. Adrian watched her over the rim of his glass, and Julian saw the watching and pretended kindly not to notice. Later, when Claire excused herself, Julian leaned back and crossed his arms. "Adrian." "What?" "She's wonderful." "I know." "And she has no idea how wonderful she is." Adrian looked at his hands. "I know that too." Julian was quiet a moment. "Then, take care of her, brother. She's not made of the same stuff you are. She's softer, the good kind of soft, and the world is rougher with people like her than it is with people like us." Adrian nodded once, slowly. "I'm trying." "I know you are." When Claire came back, Julian stood and pulled her chair out for her, and she shot Adrian a look across the table that meant, "I like him." Adrian's mouth did something small and unsteady, and he turned his face toward the window for a beat longer than he needed to. That night, in the cab home, she rested her head on his shoulder. "Your brother is a good person." "He is. He looks at you the way I look at my sister." "How is that?" She thought about it. "Like he knows exactly which parts of you would break if pushed, and like he would step in front of them himself." Adrian was quiet. She felt the slow rise and fall of his shoulder beneath her cheek. She felt the careful, attentive way his hand moved against her back. Not absent, never absent. "Claire. Come away with me next weekend." She lifted her head. "Away where?" My family has a house in the Berkshires, old, drafty, no neighbours for half a mile. I want 2 days with you where no one knows we're there. She looked at him. Just us? Just us. And no work? No phones? None. She thought about her grandmother. You'll know which it is by how he treats you in private. She had stopped having to remember that line. He had become the answer to it. She nodded. Yes. He smiled. It reached his eyes this time, and she felt the smile against the top of her hair as he leaned in and rested his chin there. The cab turned onto her street. She did not know, neither of them did, that other plans were already moving in the city behind them, quietly, with the patience of a woman used to getting her way. By Friday, Claire had packed 3 times. The first time, too many clothes. The second time, too few. The third time, she had stopped trying and put in what she would have packed for a weekend at her grandmother's: a pair of soft jeans, 2 old sweaters, the silver studs her sister had given her for her 25th birthday, and a small ceramic dish her grandmother had once sent her for the salt she always forgot to buy. She zipped the bag and set it by her door. She sat down on the edge of her bed. She tried to feel ready. She didn't. It had been a strange week. Adrian had been quieter than usual at the office. Not absent, never absent, but present in the way of a man whose mind was elsewhere even when his body was not. He had still come into her section at 11:14 on Tuesday and Thursday. He had still set down the small white box. But on Thursday he had stayed a beat too long at her desk. The door barely cracked, and he had said, "Don't tell anyone about the weekend, not yet." "I wasn't going to." "I know. I'm telling you because I trust you, not because I doubt you." She had nodded. He had left. Now on Friday afternoon, the building was bright with the false cheer of a coming weekend. People packed up early. Marta from accounting bought everyone donuts. A senior partner Claire had never quite forgiven for a meeting in October stopped by her desk to ask if her parents were coming up for the holidays, which was the closest he had ever come to small talk. Claire smiled in the right places. She watched the clock. At 4 her phone buzzed. "Downstairs, side entrance, whenever you're ready." She picked up her bag. Across town, in the office above the gallery on Newbury Street, Vivian Hartley was reviewing a thin folder of photographs. She did not flinch at any of them. In the first, Adrian was helping Margaret Ashworth out of a town car outside the Ritz-Carlton, a hand under her elbow, his head turned politely, a businessman doing what businessmen do. In the second, Margaret was laughing at something, at nothing in fact, and Adrian was looking at her as if he were waiting for a meeting to end. In the third, they were standing together in the bright winter sun outside a charity luncheon, his hand at the small of her back the way a hand briefly rests there when one is steering a guest through a doorway. The photographs were honest, but honesty, Vivian knew, was a matter of framing. She slid the folder back across the desk. "How long?" 2 weeks, Mrs. Hartley. The edits will be indistinguishable." "And the delivery?" "Anonymous, as discussed." "To the address I provided?" "Yes." Vivienne nodded once. She stood. She buttoned her coat. At the door she paused with one gloved hand on the handle. "Are you a man of discretion?" "I am." "Then be one." She left without looking back. The drive to the Berkshires took just under 3 hours. Adrian drove. Claire watched the city release them in stages. First the bridges, then the suburbs with their lit windows, then the slow opening of the road into low hills and bare trees. He kept his hand on the gear shift between them. Every few minutes, without looking, his thumb brushed the back of her hand. She did not say much, she did not need to. He played a record from his car's old system, something soft with strings, and at some point he glanced at her and said quietly, "You're allowed to relax, Claire." "I am relaxed." "Your knuckles are white." She looked down. They were. She laughed at herself and let her hand soften under his. He squeezed it once. "There's nothing waiting for us at the house," he said. "Not phones, not my mother, not the office. Just ask the woods and a kitchen I have been waiting to show you." She looked at him in the green light of the dashboard. "Adrian." Why this weekend?" He thought about it. He always thought about her questions, she had noticed. He treated them like they deserved an answer rather than a placeholder. "Because I needed a place to tell you something," he said, "and the office isn't it. and neither is my apartment." Her stomach turned, but not unhappily. "Tell me what?" "Not yet." "Tease." He smiled. The smile broke the quiet a little, the way an unexpected lamp does in a long hallway. "Wait until we're there." She did. The house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, white-painted clapboard with a green roof, the kind of house New England builds and then leaves to soften for a century. A small porch wrapped two sides. A line of bare birches stood off to the left, silver in the late light. He carried her bag inside. He turned on the lights. He started a fire in the wood stove without ceremony, the way some men make coffee. The whole house smelled of wood smoke within 15 minutes. He cooked. She set the table. He poured wine. They ate at a small pine table in the kitchen, and he asked her, properly the way he had asked her on the sofa weeks ago, about her week. She told him the truth, that her insecurity had been talking to her again, that she had stood in front of her mirror that morning and asked herself out loud why a man like him would choose a girl like her. He set his fork down. He came around the table. He did not crouch in front of her chair. He sat in the chair beside her, took both her hands in his, and looked at her the way he had looked at her on the second floor of the East Wharf, with the wind moving in the harbour windows. "Listen to me." She lifted her eyes. "There is no girl like you," he said. "There is you, and there is everyone who is not you. And I have been around the second group for 39 years, and I am tired of it. I'm not choosing down, Claire. I'm choosing up." Her throat closed. She blinked once hard, and the tears came anyway. He lifted her hand and pressed it, palm down, against his chest. She felt it. She let herself feel it. For the first time since the kiss at the gala, she did not feel beneath the joy the small cold echo of being a secret. She felt chosen. Claire had not been to the Berkshires since she was 9. That summer, her father had driven the whole family up to a rented cabin on a lake near Stockbridge, and she had spent a week pulling smooth, flat stones out of the shallows and trying to teach her sister to skip them. Her father had laughed too loud and made too much coffee and burned 3 batches of pancakes. He had been gone a long time now, gone in the way some fathers go, which is to say not absent from this earth, but absent from her life, somewhere out west with a second family and a new last name. She did not miss him often. She missed him only in places that smelled like pine. She woke that Saturday morning with the smell of pine on the air through the cracked window. The other side of the bed was empty. For a moment she did not move. The sheets were soft and old, the kind that have been washed 100 times in a house no one wants to modernize. The light coming through the gap in the curtain was the pale, generous kind only winter mornings know. Somewhere downstairs she could hear the slow, deliberate movements of a man trying not to wake her. She smiled into the pillow. She had slept, she realized. For the first time in 2 weeks, she had slept all the way through. Adrian had given her the larger of the 2 upstairs bedrooms the night before, set her bag down at the foot of the bed, kissed the top of her head, and gone. She had heard the soft click of the smaller bedroom door across the hall. She had lain awake for 10 minutes, wondering if she was disappointed, and then realized gently that she wasn't. She was relieved. Not because she didn't want him, because he had given her the night to choose. She pushed back the quilt. She put on the thick wool socks Eleanor had knitted for her birthday and the old grey sweater she had brought, because it was the most comfortable thing she owned. She went downstairs. He was in the kitchen. He was in a dark sweater with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, his hair slightly mussed at the back, and he was pouring coffee into 2 mugs as if he had been waiting for the sound of her step on the stairs. He looked up. Some careful thing in his shoulders softened. "Morning." "Morning." "Coffee or tea?" "Tea today. The good kind." He smiled. He set down the coffee. He turned to the kettle. She watched him from the doorway. He moved through this house the way he moved through nowhere else, without the slight rigidness of his city self, his shoulders lower, his hands easier with the small business of opening a cupboard. There was an old man's stillness in him here, the kind that knew where everything was without looking. She thought, this is what he looks like when no one is asking him for anything. She crossed to him. She rose onto her toes and kissed him lightly on the corner of the mouth. He set the kettle down. He turned and gathered her in. Not all at once. The way he always gathered her, with the slow precision of a man who refused to take her for granted. His arms went round her. His chin came down to rest against the top of her head, and they stood like that for a long quiet minute while the kettle began, behind them, to whistle. She did not pull back. He did not let go. When the whistle climbed too high to ignore, he reached past her shoulder, turned off the burner, and said into her hair, "Walk with me before breakfast." They walked the trail behind the house. The trees were bare. The ground crunched underfoot in that particular New England way, half frost and half old leaves. He held her hand inside his coat pocket because, he said, her fingers needed somewhere warmer than the air. He told her about the house. His grandfather had built it. His grandmother had filled it with second-hand books and good knives, and a strange habit of leaving small dishes of salt on the windowsills against the wind. His mother had not been to the house in 11 years. "She doesn't like quiet places," he said. "They embarrass her." Claire laughed at that. He told her about the year he had spent here at 22, after his father had packed 2 suitcases and moved to Arizona without explanation, working out from under that particular silence one slow morning at a time. He told her that the house had given him his life back, without ever asking for anything in return. She listened. She did not fill the silences when he stopped. She had noticed weeks ago that he was a man who told stories slowly, the way some people pour wine, a little, then more, only if you waited. By the time they got back to the house, her cheeks ached from smiling, and her boots were soaked, and he had laughed twice at things she had said. The second laugh, when she had called the leaf on his shoulder a brooch, had broken loose from him in a way she had not heard before. It had surprised him. She had seen it surprise him. She kept it. She tucked it inside herself like a small, smooth stone. That evening he cooked risotto. He was very serious about risotto. He stirred it slowly at the stove for 30 minutes, while she sat on the counter beside him with a glass of wine and watched. He had learned the recipe from his grandmother, who had also been very serious about risotto, and who had once, he said, called him a barbarian for adding cream. He had set the table on the back porch. 2 candles, a small lantern. The bare birches silver in the dark beyond. A sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled them. He wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders before she could ask for one. They ate. They drank a little. He told her between bites about the year he had thought he might be an architect himself before his father's company had needed someone to run it. She told him between bites that she had wanted briefly to be a baker before she had realized she lacked the kind of patience required to wake up at 4 in the morning. When dinner was done, he stood. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." She laughed. "There's no music. There's the wind in the trees, there's an owl. There's the wood stove sputtering. It's plenty." She set down her glass. She rose. He drew her in. His hand settled at the small of her back. His other hand took hers and held it against his chest. He did not lead her in any particular direction. They swayed, slowly, on the porch boards, the lantern dim, the stars wide above them. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. He picked it up without breaking step and settled it around them both. She rested her cheek against his collarbone. He bent his head until his mouth was near her ear. "Claire?" "I have been losing my mind over you slowly for almost 3 months." She closed her eyes. "I think about you in meetings. I think about you when I should be sleeping. I think about you when I should be thinking about anything else. And I don't want it to stop. I don't think I would survive it stopping." She lifted her face. She found his mouth in the dim light, and she kissed him. This time, neither of them held anything back. The kiss was slow. It was not a flare. It was a recognition. The kind of kiss 2 people share when they have been carrying something between them for a long time and have finally set it down. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. His hand was on the side of her neck, his thumb resting at her jaw the way a man rests his hand on a door he has decided not to leave through. "Come inside," she said quietly, her voice warm against the December chill. "Let's get out of the cold." He searched her face. Whatever he saw there made him swallow once hard and look away for half a second. He took her hand. He led her into the warm living room. The fire in the stove was low, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor. He closed the porch door behind them, gently, the way one closes the door on a small, precious thing one has built outside. He turned to her, lifting her hand to his mouth to press his lips against her knuckles. "I love you, Claire Bennett." She did not answer with words. She kissed him again. A sweet, lingering moment before she leaned her head against his chest, content to just exist there with him. He held her close on the sofa, wrapping the wool blanket tightly around them both as the night deepened. He had been awake since 6 the next morning. He had not moved, careful not to disturb the quiet peace of the room. He watched the grey morning light find her, slowly, the way light finds anything it is fond of. The room was cold, but she was warm beside him. He could hear the house settling, the particular small creaks of a 100-year-old place breathing through a winter night. Claire was asleep. She slept the way she did most things, thoroughly, one hand under her cheek, the other curled loose against the pillow, a faint frown between her brows from a dream he hoped was kind. He thought, "I will not let anyone touch this." It was a vow. He had made few in his life, and the ones he had made, he had kept. He made this one anyway. Half an hour later, he carried a tray upstairs, coffee in a chipped mug for himself, strong tea, splash of milk, no sugar, in a smaller mug for her. 2 slices of toast with the butter melting unevenly. An orange he had peeled in one long spiral, the way his grandmother had taught him as a child. She stirred when he set the tray on the bedside table. "Hi," she said, voice thick with sleep. "Hi. Is that an orange?" "It is. In December?" "They exist." She laughed. She sat up. She held the quilt to her shoulders. He set the tray across her knees and sat down on the edge of the bed and traced gently the line of her cheek with his knuckle. "I want to tell you something." She went still. "Tell me." "I want to assume this. All of it. Publicly. I want my office to know. I want Boston to know. I want my mother to know there is nothing she can do because there is nothing between us to hide. I want to call you mine in the daylight, Claire. Tomorrow. Today. Whenever you'll let me." Her eyes filled. She did not say, "Are you sure?" She had stopped doubting him somewhere between his hand on her elbow at the East Wharf and the moment he had said, "I love you," at the foot of those stairs. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "Today is fine." He pressed his forehead against hers. He let himself stay there a long moment, neither of them speaking, the steam rising from the mugs, the morning growing slowly into the room. For a single foolish second, he believed there was nothing in the world that could touch them. They drove back to Boston in the early afternoon. The drive felt shorter than it had on the way out. They stopped once for gas. Claire fell asleep on the second hour with her head against the window, and he turned the radio down 2 clicks without taking his eyes from the road. She woke as they crossed back into the city and rubbed her eyes and laughed at herself. He pulled up outside her building at 5. He kissed her at her front door. Long, without hurry, the way a man kisses a woman he intends to call his wife within the year. He held her face in his hands and told her, again, that he loved her. He told her he had a board meeting Monday morning, but that Tuesday at the 11 o'clock all hands, he would announce them. "Don't say a word until then," he said. "Let me do this right. I won't. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her once more. He walked back to the car. She stood at her door and watched the taillights disappear around the corner, and she thought with a kind of clean wonder that her life had become almost unrecognizable to her in a single weekend. She went inside. She set her bag down in the hall. She turned on the kitchen light. There was an envelope on the floor. She did not at first think anything of it. Mail, a flyer, the bill she had been avoiding. She bent down. She picked it up. She turned it over in her hand. There was no return address. There was no stamp. It had been placed there by hand. She stood a moment in her own hallway with the envelope between her fingers and a small, slow chill, the kind that has nothing to do with the weather, climbing the back of her neck. She opened it. 3 photographs fell out. She picked them up off the floor in the order they had landed. In the first, Adrian was outside a hotel she recognized. He was holding the elbow of a woman in a black coat. His hand was at her elbow the way a man's hand is at the elbow of a woman who matters. In the second, the woman was laughing. Adrian was smiling. They were close, closer than 2 business associates would stand. In the third, they were kissing. A kiss, a full, unmistakable kiss. His hand at her waist, her hand on his chest. Claire's mouth went dry. She sank down onto the hallway floor. Slowly, the way a body sinks when something has been pulled out from under it, there was a note, a single line, typed. "He is lying to you. The engagement will be announced next week." She looked at the photographs again. She looked at them again. She looked at them again. She did not cry. The not crying was worse than the crying would have been. It was a quiet, inside thing. A place inside her ribs that had been opening slowly for weeks, that closed again, hard, in the space of a single breath. The phone in her bag began to ring. She knew without looking that it was him. She did not pick it up. She did not move for a long time after the ringing stopped. The radiator clicked. Somewhere outside, a horn sounded. Her neighbor across the hall came home, slammed the door, dropped a bag of groceries. Life went on in that small, inconvenient way it does, while inside her own apartment, a thing she had been so careful about was breaking very quietly on the hallway tile. She thought slowly. He told me he had a board meeting on Monday. He didn't say what he had done before the meeting. He didn't say where he had been the week before that. He didn't say. She had not asked. She had not asked because she had not, until this moment, thought she would need to. She thought of the way he had said her name on the porch. Claire. Like it weighed something. She thought of his hand at her jaw, the way a man rests his hand on a door he does not intend to walk through. Then she thought of his hand at the waist of the woman in the photograph, and her stomach turned over once, slowly, like something heavy rolling on water. She stood up. She put the photographs back in the envelope. She walked on legs that did not feel entirely her own, to the small desk by the window where she kept her resignation letter from 2 jobs ago, the one she had never sent, because she had decided instead to stay and fight. She sat down. She opened a fresh page. She began to write. The phone on the floor in the hall began to ring again. She did not turn her head. The letter was 3 lines long. Claire had written longer in college, when she had quit her first internship over a man who had taken credit for her work. She had written more eloquent ones in the silent rage of after-hours offices. But this one she wrote without a single adjective. "I am tendering my resignation from Hartley Restoration, effective immediately. 2 weeks of unused leave should cover any required notice. Thank you for the opportunity." She signed her name. She did not date it. She folded it twice and slid it into a plain white envelope, the way she would have slid in a bill she did not intend to pay. She did not sleep that night. She lay on top of the bedspread, in the same clothes she had worn home from the Berkshires, and at 3 in the morning she got up, took the bedspread off the bed and threw it in the hallway because it smelled faintly of pine. She did not weep. She did not call her grandmother. She washed her face. She dressed in the most severe thing she owned, a black wool skirt, a charcoal blouse, plain pumps. She put her hair in a low knot. She looked at herself in the mirror over the sink and saw a woman she did not entirely recognize, the kind of woman who would not be charmed. That, she decided, was who she needed to be this morning. She arrived at the office at 7:15. She did not stop at her desk. She walked across the lobby with the envelope in one hand and the unopened envelope of photographs in the other. She did not nod at the security guard. She did not pause at the elevator banks. She rode alone to the 22nd floor and walked the long hallway to his office past empty cubicles, the lights coming on one by one ahead of her on motion sensors. His door was open. He was at his desk. He looked up as she walked in, and the relief on his face, the immediate, undisguised relief of a man who had spent the night calling a phone that did not pick up, broke something in her she had spent the past 12 hours carefully sealing. "Claire, thank God I was—" She did not let him finish. She set the envelope of photographs down on his desk first, then the resignation letter on top of it. "You don't need to give me any explanation," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she had expected. "I already understood everything." She turned to leave. "Claire." She kept walking. "Claire, stop." She did not stop. She heard the chair push back. She heard him come around the desk. She heard the photographs slide out of the envelope onto the floor behind her. She heard him say in a voice she had never heard him use before, "This isn't real." She paused with her hand on the doorframe. She did not turn. "That's a very convenient thing to say," she said quietly, "given the evidence." "Claire, look at me, please." She did not look at him. "Don't call me. Don't come to my apartment. Don't send anyone to my apartment. I will mail back any keys I have. I will return any personal items left in mine. We're done. Claire, I have never touched that woman. I have never—" "Goodbye, Adrian." She walked out. She kept her face still all the way down the long hallway, into the elevator, across the lobby, out into the grey morning on Federal Street. She walked 3 full blocks before she allowed herself to lean against the side of a building, and she put her hand against the cold brick and stood there with her eyes closed until she could breathe again. Her phone was vibrating in her bag. She took it out. She blocked his number. She put the phone away. She walked home. Back in his office, Adrian stood over the photographs on his floor. He picked them up. He laid them out on his desk. He looked at them in order, the way a man looks at a problem on a blueprint. He saw immediately what someone else might have missed. The first photograph, Margaret outside the Ritz-Carlton, he remembered. November 4th, a charity board meeting. He had walked her to her car at her father's request. He had touched her elbow because she had been wearing impossible shoes on a slick sidewalk. The second photograph he remembered too. December 2nd. A luncheon. She had laughed because someone had told a joke about the senator and the wrong fork. He had been listening to a man on his left who was trying to ask him about a contract. The third photograph he did not remember at all. He could not remember it because it had not happened. He looked at the third photograph for a long time. The angle of his head, the position of his hand, the light, the way the woman's hair fell. He had not held Margaret Ashworth like that. He had not kissed Margaret Ashworth, ever. He had not kissed anyone but Claire since the night of the gala. His mouth set into a thin, hard line. He picked up the photograph. He held it under his desk lamp. He saw, after almost a minute of looking, what he had been looking for. A small, faint inconsistency in the seam of his collar. A shadow that fell wrong. The kind of mistake only a man who designed buildings for a living, who had spent 20 years training his eye for the line of a thing, would catch. It was a forgery. A good one. A very expensive one. He set the photograph down. He turned to his desk phone. He pressed a single button. "Get me Julian, now." He sat down. He folded his hands together on the desk to keep them from shaking. He did not call his mother, not yet. He needed to think first, and he needed Julian to be the one to do what he himself was in this moment, too furious to do well. He looked for one last time at the envelope of photographs on his desk. Then he looked at the white envelope on top. He picked it up, he opened it. He read the 3 lines twice, he set it down. He pressed both hands flat against the desk. He closed his eyes. For the second time in his adult life, the first having been on the porch in the Berkshires 2 nights ago, he felt the careful architecture of his composure fail him. He let it. Just once. Just for 1 minute. Then he opened his eyes and reached for the phone. By Thursday, Claire had stopped checking the door. She had checked it on Tuesday morning, twice, before she realized she did not actually want to know whether the flowers had stopped arriving. She had stopped checking by Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday it had become a small private rule. Do not look. The flowers had not stopped arriving, neither had the cheesecake. A small white pastry box sat on the corner of her kitchen counter, unopened, 3 days old. Beside it sat a second box. Beside that a third. The fourth she had not brought in from the hallway. She would not look at it. She would not throw it away. It would not, she had decided, defeat her by becoming garbage. There were also the cards, 4 of them, each in his handwriting, which she had learned to recognize from the small marginal notes he made on her project drawings. The first had been long. She had seen it when she had picked the envelope up off her doormat with a paper towel between her fingers, as if it might burn her. She had not opened it. She had not opened any of them. She had set them in a single neat stack on her kitchen table and walked past them 11 times a day, looking and not looking, the way one walks past a window with bad news on the other side. Her grandmother had called twice. She had not answered. She had also not gone to work. Her resignation had been effective immediately, and a polite woman in HR named Cynthia had emailed her at noon on Monday, confirming she would be paid through Friday and asking her to please return her access card at her convenience. She had mailed it the same day in a plain envelope without a note, The East Wharf project would go on without her. She did not let herself think about the bridal suite with the marble fireplace. She did not let herself think about "we can save this." On Thursday afternoon the buzzer rang. She did not move. The buzzer was always him. She had become, over the course of the week, very good at not moving. The buzzer rang again. Then a knock on her actual apartment door, 3 doors and a hallway away from the street. He had been let in. Someone had let him in. She put down the book she had not been reading. The knock came again. Softer. Claire. It was not Adrian. It was Julian. She got up. She crossed the hallway. She looked through the peephole. He was alone. He had a brown paper bag in one hand and a small leather folder in the other, and his face was tired in the way of a man who had not been to bed in a couple of days. She opened the door 6 inches. "He didn't come," she said. "He doesn't know I'm here." She stared at him. "Can I come in for 10 minutes? That's all I'm asking." 10. She let him in. He set the paper bag on her kitchen counter. Thai takeout, she could tell by the smell, the kind from a place near her office she had once mentioned in passing to Adrian. He did not unpack it. He did not sit down. He set the leather folder on her kitchen table, in front of the unopened cards, and turned a chair around to face her. "You need to sit down for this," he said. She did not sit. He let her stand. "I'm not going to ask you to forgive him," Julian said. "That's not my business. I'm going to show you a few things. Then I'm going to leave and you can do whatever you want with what I've shown you, okay?" She did not nod. She did not have to. He opened the folder. The first thing he pulled out was an email, a forwarded chain printed. Vivian Hartley to an address Claire did not recognize. The subject line read, "Invoice attached." The body confirmed receipt of a payment for photographic services rendered 3rd week of November. He pulled out a second sheet. A receipt from a high-end photo editing studio in Cambridge, paid for in his mother's name. A third sheet, a copy of the 3rd photograph, the kiss, with annotations in red pen. Composite, Source A, Nov 4, Source B, Separate session, collar seam reworked, shadow correction. Claire's hand went very slowly to her mouth. "How did you get these?" "Adrian got them. He hired someone the same morning you walked into his office. He has barely slept since then, Claire. He looks completely hollowed out by the weight of it." She did not let herself feel that yet. She kept her eyes on the page in front of her. "And your mother, my mother thought she was protecting him. From you. From a marriage she had decided was beneath us. She didn't think you'd survive the photos. She thought you'd leave and that would be the end of it. She didn't think anyone would look closely enough to catch it." Julian's mouth twisted. "She didn't account for him loving you." Claire's vision blurred. She put her hand on the back of the kitchen chair to steady herself. "He's completely broken by this, Claire. Don't. He isn't eating. He isn't sleeping. He keeps the phone on the desk in front of him at all times in case you call. He hasn't called me in 3 days, and he has called me every Wednesday for 15 years. The only thing he says when I do get him on the phone is your name." She sat down, slowly, on the floor, beside the chair, because her legs had stopped being reliable. Julian crouched in front of her. "I'm not going to push you. He wouldn't want me to. He told me this morning that if you needed to walk away for good, he would understand. He only wanted you to know what was real." He set the folder on the floor beside her. He stood up. "I'm going to leave you the food. Eat something, please." He let himself out. She heard the door click. She sat on her kitchen floor for almost an hour with the folder beside her and the cards stacked on her table and the white pastry boxes in a row on the counter, and at the end of that hour she stood up, walked to her phone, unblocked his number, and stared at it a long time. She did not call him. She did one thing. She wrote, with hands that had begun, finally, to shake, "Come tonight." She pressed send. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor again and let herself cry for the first time in 5 days. The rain started at 7, the kind of slow December rain that turns the city into a watercolor. Claire had not eaten any of Julian's takeout. She had moved it finally into the fridge after the smell of the lemongrass began to feel like a small kindness she had not earned. She had washed her face. She had changed into a soft grey sweater, the same one from the morning at the country house. She had not been able to put on shoes. She had stood for 10 minutes barefoot on her cold floor before she had given up and pulled on socks. She had read the cards. She read them in the order they had arrived. The first was 3 pages long, the second, 1 page, the third, half a page, the fourth, 2 lines. I am not the man in those photographs. Please let me prove it. She had read them sitting at her kitchen table with the folder open beside her. By the time she finished, the rain had begun in earnest. The cards had small wrinkled spots on them, and she did not know when she touched her face whether the wet was from the rain at her window or from her own quiet weeping. The buzzer rang at 8. She did not move at first. She had asked him to come. She had pressed send. She knew it was him. But the body, she was finding, did not always obey what the mind had decided. She made herself stand. She made herself walk. She pressed the button without speaking. She unlocked her door. She backed up against the kitchen counter and she waited. She heard his step in the hallway. She had heard that step many times. Polished shoes on the marble of the firm. A measured stride. A man who did not hurry because almost nothing in his life had ever needed to be hurried for. The step that came down her hallway now was not that step. It was uneven, slower. The step of a man who had walked a long way to get here. He stopped at her door. She heard him stand a moment before knocking. The knock, when it came, was soft enough to be a request, not an arrival. "Come in," she said. The door opened. She did not, for a long moment, recognize him. He was thinner. He had not shaved in days. His coat was wrong for the rain, and the rain had darkened the shoulders of it. His hair was wet at the temples. There were shadows under his eyes that looked as if someone had set them there with a heavy thumb. He was holding in one hand a leather folder, in the other nothing. He stood inside her door and looked at her, and the look went through her like cold water. Claire. She did not at first speak. She stepped forward. She took the folder from his hand and set it on the kitchen counter without looking at it. She did not need to see what was inside. She had already seen it. "I know," she said. He breathed out. It was a long breath, the kind a man takes when he has been holding one for almost a week. "You know," he repeated almost too quietly to hear. "Julian came. He told me he was going to. And I read your cards." He closed his eyes. He did not move toward her. He stood inside her door as if he had not yet been invited any further into her home, which in a way he had not. "Claire, I should have... Adrian, I should have protected you from her. I should have seen... Adrian, come here." He did not move. She crossed the floor to him. She stopped in front of him. She looked up. His eyes were red, and the line of his mouth was the line of a man who had been carrying a small, terrible weight in it for 4 days, without setting it down. She took his cold, wet hand in both of hers. She put it against her cheek. For a moment he could not breathe. Then his other arm went around her and pulled her in, and he held her against him the way a man holds onto solid ground after a terrible storm, with both fists, with everything, and his face went down into the curve of her shoulder and stayed there. He did not weep. He had spent that already somewhere else, but she felt the small, hard tremor in his shoulders, and she put her arms around the back of his head and held him through it. They stood that way a long time, long enough for the rain on the window to change pitch, long enough for the radiator to click and start, long enough for whatever had been pulled tight in both of them for almost a week to begin, slowly, to ease. When he finally lifted his face, he did not let her go. "I will never," he said quietly, "hide you again. Not for an hour, not for a minute. I don't care what it costs me with her. I don't care what it costs me with anyone. Do you hear me?" "I hear you." "Say it back to me." "You will never hide me again." "Never." She nodded. He pressed his forehead against hers. He did not kiss her. Not yet. Neither of them was ready for the lightness of a kiss. They needed the quiet instead. The kind of quiet two people share when they have nearly lost each other and are now relearning, slowly, how to occupy the same room. She led him to the sofa. He sat. She sat beside him. She pulled a blanket over both of them. She made him eat, half a piece of toast, then half another, then the soup Julian had left. He ate as if it were medicine. He stayed the night on her sofa. He did not ask to come into her bed. She did not ask him to. There would be time for that. Both of them knew, in the morning and in the morning after that. For tonight, what they needed was to be in the same small apartment, in the same small hallway, breathing the same small air. Just before she fell asleep in her own room down the hall, he came to her doorway and he said only, "I'm here, Claire." "I know," she said. And she slept. 2 mornings later, he stood in front of an extraordinary board meeting in the largest conference room of Hartley Restoration, and he told the truth about the photographs, about his mother, about Claire, about loving her, about intending to marry her in time, about the fact that he would, effective immediately, be taking a step back from any business arrangement his mother had a hand in, until she made amends to the woman she had tried to break. He looked at the room when he was done. The room did not, for a long moment, know what to do. Then a senior partner near the back stood up and began to clap, slowly, once, twice. The rest of the room joined. Adrian did not smile. He nodded once and walked back to his seat. He sent Claire a single text on the way out of the room. "It is done." She read it in her grandmother's kitchen in Camden, Maine, where she had taken the train that morning to be held, finally, by the only woman who had told her from the beginning to watch how he treated her in private. She read the text twice. She closed her eyes. She let herself smile. The East Wharf Hotel opened in June. It opened on a Saturday afternoon under a sky that could not decide whether to rain. Claire stood in the lobby in a simple ivory dress, the same one she had worn to a friend's wedding 3 years before, and she watched 100 people walk for the first time across the floors she had helped redraw. The brass on the staircase had been polished. The marble fireplace in the bridal suite had been restored to a kind of quiet glory. A small string trio played near the windows. She had come back to the firm in April, not as a junior architect. Adrian had offered her the lead on the restoration of an old shipyard office in Salem, a year-long project, her name on the documents, her decisions on the work. She had thought about it for 3 days before saying yes. She had said yes in the end, not because of him, but because she had missed her own life. The yes had felt, for the first time in a long while, like a thing she had chosen for herself. They were not married yet. He had not asked formally, with a ring. She had not pressed. There had been a winter of slow repairs, coffee in his apartment on Sunday mornings, long walks along the harbour, dinners at her place, where he had eventually, over the course of 3 weeks, hung the small framed picture of her grandparents she had been meaning to put up for 2 years. He had moved a single set of his own clothes into her closet in February. She had moved a single set of hers into his in March. Neither of them had spoken about the arrangement out loud. Both of them had noticed. His mother had not been in their life for those months. That, too, had changed. Vivienne Hartley had come to Claire's apartment one Saturday in May. She had not called ahead. She had stood at the door in a coat too elegant for the building, and when Claire had opened, she had not for once stepped forward, as if the entryway were hers. "I owe you an apology." Claire had not let her in immediately. She had folded her arms. "Yes. And I owe you a longer one than I am capable of giving in a hallway." A pause. "You have 10 minutes. Vivienne had come in. She had not sat. She had stood by the window, looked out at the small fire escape and the brick wall of the next building, and she had said without ornament, "I was a coward. I told myself I was protecting him. I was protecting nothing but my own idea of what a Hartley should look like. I was wrong. I have raised 2 sons who are better men than I have been a mother. I do not know how to ask you to forgive me. I am asking anyway." Claire had not, for a long moment, spoken. Then she had said, "Adrian is the one you should be asking. He won't see me. Not until you do." "That sounds like Adrian." "Yes." Another pause. "I will see you," Claire had said at last. "Not because I have forgiven you, but because he is your son, and I am not going to be the reason a mother and her son live in 2 different worlds. I will see you slowly and carefully, and you will earn every inch back." Vivienne had nodded. Her hand had gone briefly to the edge of the window frame, and Claire had seen, for the first time perhaps, that the woman was older than she had let herself look. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She had not. She had instead sent Claire a single small package every 2 weeks since, a book, a tin of biscuits, Once a pair of antique cufflinks she said had been her grandfather's, and that she thought Claire should one day give to her own son if she ever had one. She had not been forgiven yet. She had stopped acting as if she expected to be. She had begun, slowly, to be allowed back in. The proposal happened in October. He took her to the East Wharf alone on a Sunday evening, after the last guest of a small private event had left. The lobby was empty. The lights were soft. The marble fireplace in the bridal suite, when they walked into it, had been laid with new wood and lit by his own hand half an hour before, and there were no candles, no music, no audience. Just him. Just her. Just the room they had imagined together 100 mornings ago. He took both her hands. He went down on one knee. He looked up at her, his face that quiet, familiar face she had now seen through a year of weather, and he said, "Claire Bennett, build a life with me." She did not let him finish. She had said yes before her knees had decided whether to give out. He laughed. He had not laughed like that in front of anyone but her, ever. He stood. He kissed her in the empty room. He slipped a small, simple ring onto her finger, a single dark stone in an old silver setting, his grandmother's, the one she had left him for the woman he chose. It fit. They married in February at her grandmother's house in Maine. 40 people, a fire in the hearth. Eleanor, in a dress she had not worn in 20 years, walked Claire down the short wooden hallway because Claire's father had still not come home, and she had decided long ago that he was not the man she needed to be given away by. Julian was Adrian's best man. He cried during the vows. He told everyone at the small reception afterward that this was the only wedding he had ever attended where he had been able, in full conscience, to give a speech that did not need a single rewrite. Vivienne sat at the back. She did not give a toast. She had asked in advance not to. She had said it was Claire's day and that she had used up all her speeches. Claire had brought her a piece of cake. It was a beginning. A year and a half later, their garden in the back of the small house they had bought together in Brookline was decorated with paper lanterns and pale ribbons. The afternoon was warm. The baby shower had drawn 20 women. Claire's grandmother in the place of honor in a wicker chair, her sister down from Vermont with a baby of her own on one hip, Marta from accounting who had once handed her a donut without realizing what she was witnessing, 3 women from Hartley Restoration who had become friends over the last 2 years, and Vivian in a simple blouse helping carry plates without being asked. Claire looked radiant, with a beautiful, unmistakable softness to her silhouette, wearing a soft cotton dress and no shoes. She was radiant in the ordinary way of women who have stopped trying to be anything other than themselves. When the guests had gone, when the lanterns had been blown out and the last plates carried inside, Adrian came up behind her in the kitchen. He set his hands on the small mound of her belly gently, the way a man cradles something he has been waiting his whole life for. He bent his face into the place behind her ear that he had learned, over many evenings, made her go quiet. "Tired?" he murmured. "Happy." He pulled her slowly into the living room. There was no music. There was the hum of the fridge and the soft tick of the clock above the mantel. He drew her into the same easy dance they had begun on a porch in the Berkshires almost 2 years ago. She rested her cheek against his collarbone. He put one hand against the small of her back and the other against the curve of their daughter, and he whispered to her, to the small life between them, a slow string of promises she would carry, intact, for the rest of her life. She closed her eyes. She thought for a long, sweet moment of a ballroom full of strangers, of a chandelier scattering light, of a young woman with shaking hands walking across a polished floor toward a man who had been waiting longer than either of them had known. Best decision she had ever made. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.